All right, everyone, welcome into another episode of Around the Octagon. This is our second of the week. We're going to be going over UFC Atlanta, the main card there, joined by Luke and Ryan. Ryan, welcome back. How are you? How are you to be here today, man?
Yeah, it feels good. Glad to be back. I missed a recap. A lot of things I really want to touch on. Ju Sang Yu, good shit. Bring the belt home to Korea. That would be awesome. Merab looks better every single time he steps out there. Pretty crazy second finish in the UFC. Yeah, absolutely nuts, man. UFC 316 definitely delivered. I know a lot of people were hating on the card, Sean O'Malley coming back and everything, but Merab did his thing. He looks better, like I said, every single time he goes out there. And we got some new prospects on the rise. So looking forward to what comes out of that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that card delivered, and I'm very excited about this fight night coming up on Saturday. I think we have some great fights, even in the prelims. We're not going to be covering that today, but there's a couple prelim fights. I'd keep your eyes out for Malcolm Wellmaker. I know we touched on his story. Crazy power, very winnable, supposed to win matchup against Chris Matinho. You also have Paul Craig, Rodolfo Bellato on the prelims, as well as Ricky Simon versus Cameron Smotherman. And there's some other fun fights. So definitely some fun ones there. But we're just going to cover this main card, and we're going to kick it off with Alonzo Menifield versus Omar Sy in the light heavyweight division. Omar Sy is coming in at a minus 700 favorite, so that's a very stiff line. We've seen some guys with lines like that lose earlier in the year, especially those with the zero, and Omar Sy does currently have that zero. So, Luke, I'll kick this one over to you. What direction are you leaning in this fight?
Yeah, I'm going Omar Sy. I think we're gonna have a bounce back fight. I know he won his first two fights in the UFC, and as you mentioned, has that undefeated record. But I think a little bit disappointing in his last fight. I think a lot of the fans thought he was gonna get that guy out of there. He ended up winning by UD. I think it's a tougher matchup, especially when you get a guy like Menifield, who's been in there. He's a vet, never really top of the class, but always kind of around and fighting good fights, fighting competitive fights. But I think we're going to see, an improved Omar Sy here, and I think he retains his zero in the loss column. I got Omar Sy. I don't think he gets him out of there. I think it's by decision. I think we see a good showing from Menifield. Yeah, I think it's a UD again for him.
Yeah, Luke, I agree with you here. I mean, Omar Sy is riding high. UFC debut, won by sub, didn't get the finish he was looking for, but very well-rounded, 4 wins by KO, 4 wins by sub. The guy can pretty much do it all. Already has a sub against UFC competition. And Alonzo Menifield's career up to this point now has just been a little up and down. Was on a 2-fight skid, got his win back in a split decision against Julius Walker when they last fought. But I think this should be a comfortable one for Omar Sy. Like you said, Luke, I don't know if he gets him out of there. Possibly could, I'm sure he'll be looking for the finish. But with the veteranship of Alonzo Menifield, I see this one going to a decision.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, too, where it's honestly very difficult to pick against such a heavy favorite. And I know you get burnt by it, but when you look at Omar Sy and you look at where he holds his advantages, I mean, he's just a much bigger guy, massive reach advantage. He's a very good grappler. He can strike. He can kind of do it all, and he's just young, opposed to Menifield, who is, I mean, he's 37 years old, but at the same time, he doesn't really seem like a true 37-year-old, and it is a bit different when you're up there at that light heavyweight division compared to being at the lower weight classes with how you age and whatnot. But this is going to be his 6th fight in the last 2 years, so he's remaining active. And the 2 guys he has lost to recently, I mean, you have Azamat Mirzakhanov, who we just saw fight last weekend, killer. Carlos Olberg, he's been on a tear, beat Jan Blachowicz a few months ago, killer. So he's been in there with some very high-level competition. So it makes me a little bit wary with this line being so stiff, but I'm going to agree, and I'm going to go Omar Sy, and I like the decision call as well, Luke. Kicking it off in the next fight, we have Mansur Abdul-Malik, another heavy favorite over Cody Brundage. Cody Brundage, interesting fighter because you never really know like what attitude Cody Brundage is going to have. It seems like sometimes he goes in there, gets hit, and then doesn't want to fight. Then sometimes he does. And Mansur Abdul-Malik is the kind of guy to put his paws on Cody Brundage. So I'm a little nervous for the chin of Cody Brundage here. Ryan, let's hear your take on this one.
Yeah, Abdul-Malik, he hits like a truck. I mean, very impressive win on the Contender Series. Got that done by KO, and then fought Nick Klein in his last fight, another Contender Series alum, making his UFC debut. And I will say, Nick Klein, I remember that fight, put Abdul-Malik in some trouble. You hit him with a pretty nice flush spinning elbow. Didn't really see it coming. It was just one of those strikes, landed on the side of his head, temple, the ear. Had Abdul wobbled a little bit, but Abdul was able to bite down on that mouthpiece, push him up against the cage, and eventually find that knockout win. And I think when it comes to a guy like Cody Brundage, like you said, Zach, you never know what you're going to get. And the career is just, like I said before about Alonzo Menifield, but it's just, up and down, back and forth. Last fight he won, he fought Julian Marquez, knocked him out, but he was taking a lot of punishing shots. Julian Marquez had him up against the cage in that fight, and they were swinging, and I forget whose mouthpiece fell out. Brundage's mouthpiece fell out. They got separated for a second, and I think Julian Marquez, before the mouthpiece came out and the ref stopped off, and Julian Marquez was kind of forced to lay off the brakes for like those couple of seconds. That's when Cody Brundage was able to sneak his way in and find Julian Marquez's chin. But I think Julian Marquez in that fight was way closer to a finish than people realize. So I have Abdul-Malik winning this one again, continuing that KO streak, just that forward pressure, pushing him up against the cage, using his size, using his build, that extended pressure. He'll be hitting him with some mean shots, and I think he gets him out of there.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm right with you there. I think Abdul-Malik, it's very similar to the fight prior to this. You got an up-and-coming, undefeated prospect versus a guy who's, not as much as Menifield, but has been war tested, has been there with the likes of Bo Nickel, guys like that. I think you hit the nail on the head. He is a little bit chinny, and I don't really see an avenue to victory for him. Abdul-Malik, 3 fights in the UFC if you're including Contender Series, 3 knockouts, all by ground and pound or some kind of TKO KO. I don't see that stopping here. And I think this is another good prospect to keep your eye out for. A cool name as well. Some name recognition with that name. And it just, I think he gets it done here. I'm taking it by knockout him. I would say, I think Cody Brundage is tough enough to get out of the first round. I think he gets it done in the second.
Yeah, one of my plays for the week is going to be Mansur Abdul-Malik by knockout, assuming the odds aren't too egregious. Like I'd play that minus 200, minus 225. And with Cody Brundage, it's very weird because if you look at his fight log, you can make legitimate arguments that when he fought Jacob Malkoun got himself DQ'd. Malkoun was winning the fight. When he fought Zachary Reese, he had that slam KO. Interesting. Julian Marquez, like Ryan, you just touched on. Like all those wins have some weird asterisk to them in some way. And I think Abdul-Malik is just going to be too much. And I think when he puts his hands on Cody Brundage, we're going to see Cody Brundage kind of be like, man, do I really want to be in this octagon? And I think Mansur Abdul-Malik will get him out of there. Moving on to the next fight. Here's another very interesting one, in my opinion, to the bantamweight division. We have Cody Garbrandt versus Raoni Barcelos. Cody Garbrandt is like a plus 150 underdog here against Barcelos. Interesting fight matchup. Barcelos coming off that win over Peyton Talbot. I think maybe that could be driving the price up on Garbrandt a little bit there. But Luke, I'll let you take it from here. What's your opinion on this fight?
Yeah, I'm going with our boy No Love here. I think, Barcelos, I think the line is definitely a little skewed. I know we talked about this before going live. A little skewed because of the victory over Peyton Talbot. Obviously, you get an experienced vet in there against, a young prospect. We saw Raul Rojas, sometimes they just have the good game plan. They have the good corner. They know how to attack certain offenses. And I think everything that Barcelos did well in that fight with Peyton Talbot, I don't see it working against Cody. Let's be honest, like Cody Garbrandt's base, I know he's a great striker, he's highlight knockouts, but his base really is wrestling. He's a pretty good wrestler. He slacks off in the jiu-jitsu department. We saw that last fight with Figueiredo getting the choke. I believe rear naked choke in that fight. He's had a lot of time off. I think when this fight just boils down to is the chin of Cody Garbrandt. If Barcelos can find the chin, he could put Cody out. We know he's super chinny. The old age is not helping him out in that aspect. But if he doesn't get knocked out, I think he wins this fight. I think he's a better overall striker. I think he could use the wrestling well in this to his advantage for sure. And I think it's more so just a value play. If you catch Cody Garbrandt here at plus money, this is a good play. And I know it has nothing to do with fighting, but this will be the first time we see Cody Garbrandt with the dagger tattoo over his eye, the Anakin-like dagger tattoo. And if you've seen pictures circulating around, he has cornrows for this fight. So we're seeing a new evolution of the Cody
That's wild.
Garbrandt here. So I'm taking no love. I'm taking him by decision. I think it's a good fight for 3 rounds. I think he wins 2-1. And I'm taking Cody Garbrandt by decision.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I like everything you just touched on about no love here. Especially the fact that he comes to that wrestling base, which obviously Peyton Talbot did not have when Raoni Barcelos fought him. So I feel like he'll be able to defend takedowns for the most part. You know, he might be put on his back for a little bit, but I think he's going to be able to scramble his way out of it. And then on the feet, just between the speed, the footwork, and the power of Cody, it really favors him in this fight. If he just plays on the outside, you know, touches Raoni Barcelos for 3 rounds, I can see that happening pretty clear. I think Cody should be able to coast his way to a decision, and who knows, he might even be able to find the chin of Raoni Barcelos. He's getting up there in age as well, 38 years old, you know, been tested before, a lot of wars. He got put out cold with that kind of weird, like, check left hook by Umar Nurmagomedov. Obviously, there's really no comparing the two fighters. Umar's in a class of his own when it comes to compared to Cody, but I think the line here is a little miscued just because of Barcelos being able to put out Peyton Talbot as such a heavy underdog that he was in his last fight. So give me no love, maybe late round, maybe 3rd round KO. Take it.
I like no love as well, so we're gonna make that another clean sweep. And another thing I want to touch on. So I know I said earlier that Barcelos seems to be overvalued coming off that Talbot win. His fight prior to that against Christian Quiones, he did find the submission in round 3, but prior to that submission, he was down on the judges. Well, he was down 2018, then 2 19-19s, and it was a very, very competitive fight. And I think Cody Garbrandt is definitely a step up to Christian Quiones, and he's a step up to Peyton Talbot as well, because I don't know if I want to say he does hold a power advantage over Talbot, I would say. I mean, Cody Garbrandt has hands. When his timing's on, it's ridiculous, and that does happen every once in a while. And I think he'll be able to fend off the wrestling of Barcelos, like you touched on, Luke. Garbrandt coming from that wrestling background, I think his wrestling defense will hold up, and he'll just land the bigger, more impactful shots on the feet. I have him winning this fight, and I agree he might be able to find that chin as well. That's definitely in the cards. Next up, we have a middleweight bout again of Edmen Shahbazyan against Andre Petroski. Shahbazyan here is coming in as a slight favorite. Interesting matchup here. Ryan, I know we were talking about this earlier. I'll let you start this one off.
Yeah, I like Petroski. I like Petroski in this fight. Shahbazyan, you know, heavy hands, all that. But I mean, Petroski has like, you know, 1 to 2 things that he does really well. I mean, he plants his feet, hits like a truck, and then it's just the offensive wrestling. And I think that poses a serious problem, especially with the guy that's as tall as Edmen Shahbazyan and sort of like lanky in a sense, where he has to plant his feet. I think the takedown's going to be there, and I think once Petroski gets him on the ground, he's going to keep him there and just kind of coast his way to a decision here. I don't see, outside of the knockout, Shahbazyan winning this fight. I mean, he can wrestle on his own, but Petroski also has a pretty competent ground game in terms of jiu-jitsu, and I think, you know, he'll scramble, look for position, and he'll be fighting subs, and it just gives Edmen Shahbazyan a lot more to worry about. So give me Petroski here.
Yeah, right. I agree with everything you said. I think, you know, we were also touching on this one before we came live here. I think Petroski definitely has the advantage overall in the wrestling and the grappling. And I think Shahbazyan definitely has the advantage on the feet. But I just don't think Shahbazyan is as much as a slouch on the ground, to a point where like Petroski is just gonna be able to control the fight on the ground and get, you know, 8 to 10 minutes of control time in this fight. I think we're going to be surprised with Shahbazyan's defense. And I just think like this is a huge step down almost in competition for him recently, and over, like we were talking about before, he's lost to Jack Hermanson, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, Gerald Mearshart. Like, these are guys, when we think about it, like, are top of the heap in terms of grappling and, you know, offensive wrestling, BJJ in this division. Petroski definitely has the advantage, but I think if his method to victory here is, you know, getting on the ground, getting on top, and just kind of holding him there, And Shahbazyan, every round starts on the feet. So I'm going to take Shahbazyan here. I think he gets Petroski. Excuse me. I think he gets him out of there. I'm taking him by knockout, I think, in the second or third round.
I'm going to agree with Luke here. I'm going with Edmen Shahbazyan. I think his striking will be a little bit too much for Andre Petroski, and I think he'll be able to fend off the takedowns for the most part. If you look at who Petroski has beaten on his 3-fight win streak, you have Josh Fremd, Dylan Budka, and Rodolfo Vieira. I 100% think Edmen Shahbazyan is a step up in competition from those three. And Shahbazyan has just also been in there against the better competition. And I think with him being just 27 years of age, training over there at Extreme Couture, he just has much more room for growth compared to Andre Petroski. So I just think the upside's higher. And while I do see Petroski having some success with the wrestling throughout the fight, that might steal him around. I still think Shahbazyan will land the bigger shots and potentially find the chin of Petroski. So with the finishing potential there, and I also think he could just edge out the rounds with the more impactful shots and whatnot, I'm definitely leaning Shahbazyan. Moving on to the co-main event in a women's flyweight bout, we have Thug Rose Namajunas opposed to Miranda Maverick. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of just think Thug Rose is better about everywhere. She should hold the advantage, especially in the striking department here. But Ryan, I'll let you take this one from here.
Yeah, Zach. I mean, I agree with your point there. It's I think Rose at this point in her career, former champion, seen it all, won the belt twice, just faced better competition throughout all of her fights, especially compared to Miranda Maverick. I mean, you're looking at her bouts, even the ones she loses. Erin Blanchfield, she lost that one, but then won against Tracy Cortez, Amanda Ribas, lost to Menifield and Carla Esparza. And I just think when it comes to the level of competition and the veteranship here, like Rose has seen it all, and slick striking on the feet. Miranda Maverick might hold the edge in the wrestling department, but I don't think that's enough to get a girl like Rose out of there, especially given like her skill set, and she has a competent jiu-jitsu game. So I'm leaning Rose here. I guess it also depends on sort of the mindset that Rose comes into this fight. I know sometimes, like she has doubts and whatnot, but I think she should be able to comfortably edge this one out on the scorecards.
Yeah, right. To be honest, in this one, while I was doing research and just overall getting the vibe of this fight, I was undecided hopping on this podcast. I didn't know which way I was going to go. I think it's more so just like the tale of two careers. I know Rose isn't that old, but I mean, ever since she lost to Esparza, it's kind of been downhill. Lost to Maria, or I don't know, however you pronounce the girl who just fought for the belt. I always mess up her name, so I apologize. She beat Amanda Ribas and Tracy Cortez, but then lost to the up-and-coming Erin Blanchfield. And I think there's a lot of similarities between Miranda Maverick and Erin Blanchfield in terms of the offensive wrestling. I know they fought, and Blanchfield got the better of her a while ago, like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. But I think it just depends on what Rose Namajunas we get. The Rose that is fighting today is not the Rose that beat Weili twice. It's definitely a different Rose. But at the end of the day, this is a 3-round fight. This isn't a 5-round fight. We've seen Rose be slow in 5-rounders. I think also that gets to her head. She's got to get to the championship rounds. I think you hit it on the head. Her stand-up is definitely way better than Maverick's here. And I think her grappling is good enough to fend off the takedowns, the offensive takedowns by Miranda Maverick. I don't think she's going to have as much success as a lot of people think. And at first I thought this line might have been a little skewed. I definitely think it should be closer, but I think Rose should still be the favorite. Even though Miranda Maverick's, won 5 out of the last 6 on a 4-fight win streak in the UFC, very impressive. I think Rose is just a step up in competition. I think, this is a former champion, and I think that's what we're going to see. I think Rose gets it done here. I don't think it's a very entertaining fight. I think it's pretty boring, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to split decision. But I think at the end of the day, Rose gets her hand raised. I'm taking Rose Namajunas here by decision.
I'm going to make it a sweep for Rose here just because I do think she holds such a big advantage on the feet, and I think she'll be able to fend off the wrestling as much as she'll need to. But I do want to circle back, Luke, because I know you touched on that Miranda Maverick's kind of similar fighting-wise to Erin Blanchfield. And if you watch that Rose Namajunas Erin Blanchfield fight, Rose won rounds 1, 2, and then round 3, she initiated the wrestling for no reason. And then the fight went straight downhill from there. So it's
Yeah.
just really the fight IQ of Rose Namajunas that scares me. And it's kind of what you were alluding to, Ryan, where it's like, what's her mindset going to be like? Because I guess it's directly correlated with her fight IQ. So if she's just not an idiot and can just not entertain any of the wrestling, any of that, and just do what she does best, I don't see a reason why she should lose this fight to Miranda Maverick. I do just think she's better. But we will move on to the main event, a welterweight bout where both guys are in title contention here. We have Kamaru Usman coming in as the underdog, a little bit over 2-1 to Joaquin Buckley, who is on just an absolute heater. And Luke, I'll let you just take it from here. I want to hear your opinion on this fight.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I wasn't the biggest Buckley fan when he first started fighting the UFC. I mean, he's always been in the mix with tough guys. You know, I think that Kevin Holland fight was when I started really liking Kevin Holland. But you got to tip your cap to Joaquin Buckley, man. He is an absolute beast right now. He's on probably one of the hottest streaks in the UFC in terms of just like dominating wins. Last time out against Cody, really dominated him that whole fight. Looked like one guy wanted to be there, one guy completely didn't want to be there, wanted to be home at the couch. Then he goes before that, he fights Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one of the best strikers in the UFC's history, and knocks him out. I think we could all, going into that fight, I thought he was going to wrestle him, thought he was going to dominate that way, but you know, he played the game that Stephen Thompson plays and was able to play it better. Then you go on the other side, you go Kamaru Usman, who, yeah, he lost the belt twice, the late head kick knockout by Leon Edwards. Then he comes back, and Leon Edwards, you know, closer fight, but I think Leon Edwards definitely deserved to get his hand raised there. And then takes a short notice fight up a weight class against the guy who's most likely fighting for the belt next in Khamzat. And he looked good. I mean, that was a great fight. I think for all the guys that were saying that, you know, and are still saying now that Usman's washed, Usman's knees can't hang up or hold up with the rest of his body, I think that fight proved that he can. I just, you know, I know San's a huge Buckley guy, and we've been texting about it all week. I'm going to agree with him here, man. Buckley is just, this is the train that you don't want to get in front of. Usman is 38 years old. Yes, he's a former champion. Yes, he's probably top 10 UFC fighter of all time. You know, probably the best in this division's history. I just think right now, with their career trajectories right now, Buckley's on, you know, he's on a path to the top. I think we're going to be talking about, and, you know, within the next year or so, Buckley belt chance here. Obviously, Islam kind of slows his roll down a little bit with the move up. But I don't think Usman has what it takes to beat Buckley. I mean, just look what he did to Covington, not comparing Usman to Covington, but they do have similar styles, and just kind of fiend off all the takedowns, was able to, you know, really hurt him on the feet. Usman's, at this point in time, Usman's not going to knock out Buckley. I don't see him having his old self success in terms of the grappling. Buckley's no slouch in wrestling. He, you know, he has the ability to get up when he does get taken down, and when he's standing on the feet, any second he has the ability to get a knockout here. I'm going to tip the cap to Usman and say that he's not going to get knocked out here, so I'm going to take Buckley by decision. But I think we see a super impressive Buckley fight, a complete game all around in every aspect of, you know, mixed martial arts here. And I'm looking forward to this one. This is a great fight. I'm taking Buckley by decision.
Yeah, Luke, I like everything you just touched on, and I do agree with you. I do have Buckley winning this fight. For me, it just comes down to, you know, Usman's, like I said, up there in age, and Buckley is just on this absolute heater of a run. I mean, I think 6-fight win streak, 3 of them by KO, 3 of them by decision, but he's really found his home at welterweight. You could tell, and even when he was fighting, and he was getting some impressive knockouts. Obviously, he had like the most viral knockout of all time against Impega Sagane. I think I'm saying his name right. You know, like that kind of 360 ninja kick or what have you.
Yep.
But you could always tell, especially when he fought Kevin Holland, it's like he's just a little bit undersized for middleweight. You know, these guys just are, you know, are cutting from 215, 220, and Buckley's walking around like 205. So 200 pounds. You could tell just a little bit on the smaller side. Finally makes the career decision to move down to welterweight and has just been having an absolute go of it. Looks better and better every single fight. 31, entering his prime. And I guess the thing that really tips it over the edge for me is it's not as much Usman's lack of activity, but he hasn't fought since October of 2023. And then, you know, getting back in there, I always worry a little bit about ring rust, not so much of guys in the same caliber as Usman, you know, like these guys like the GSPs, you know, who came back off their long layoffs, fights, Michael Bisping for the middleweight belt, wins. But at the same time, it's just that lack of inactivity and Usman, dealing with these like career injuries, especially with the knees, and Buckley just being younger, fresher, and just always active seals the deal for me. I don't, like you said, Luke, I don't think that Buckley KOs him, but I think that he utilizes all aspects of his game to get that decision.
So I got a quick question for you here, Ryan. So both of you guys seem to be on or be in agreement here that it'll be a Joaquin Buckley UD or something along those lines. He will not find a finish in a 5-round fight because Buckley's never gone 5 rounds. I mean, he was booked for 5 rounds with Colby. Obviously, that had the doctor stoppage in the 3rd. Do you see Buckley, because he's one of those guys, very muscular, quick twitch, do you see him potentially gassing out come rounds 4 or 5? Because I do not see Kamaru Usman gassing out.
No, I mean, I don't see Usman gassing out. Obviously, he has that championship round experience. But at the same time, it's like near the end of round 3 is when Buckley was able to find his KO against Stephen Thompson, putting up a pretty competitive and like cardio-based fight. And I think Buckley has enough fight IQ and is a smart enough fighter to pace himself. Obviously, he's been training for 5-round fights since Colby Covington and then going up to this one. So he knows at this point in his career with the streak that he's on, he's most likely going to be fighting in 5-round events. Like he has to prepare himself for that. And this dude's just been talking, for the last year or so since we've been up, he's like talking about Bilal when he was the champion and saying everyone disrespects Bilal, but like I'm training. I think this guy has been training for 5-round fights for the better part of 2 years, just because he knows and he envisions himself holding that belt one day, and he believes that he will be champion one day. And I think that with that mindset, he prepares for championship round, for championship fights, 5-round fights, main event fights. And I think that with that and his IQ, his fight IQ, being able to mix it up, he'll be able to lay off the brakes, not always go for the kill shot, and pace himself in this one.
I will say one, not necessarily counter argument, but one thing I want to add in there is, I know you mentioned him looking great towards the end of round 3 when he found that knockout over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but fighting Kamaru Usman is just such a different fight that is just much more exhausting when you have that guy who is very, very prone to get you in the clinch, pressure, wrestling, and whatnot. And there's nothing more tiring than the wrestling aspect of the fight, where with Wonderboy, he was able to fight a fight more suitable to his own. But I don't know if he will get
Sorry to cut you off a little bit, but I think that the training aspect for this fight is very similar to how he trains for Colby. I do agree with you. Usman's more of an offensive presence than Colby Covington is. I don't think that's, really any kind of debate. But I don't think this is a huge difference in training camp and approach and really game plan for him. And I know he got the stoppage and he was really beating him up, but he wasn't looking tired in that Colby fight either. This is not like a Marab attack out of Usman, especially at this age. It's not that kind of pressure where it's like, oh my God, you really have to be concerned about the cardio. And like we touched on multiple times, I mean, he's 31 years old. This is like the prime of UFC fighters. We normally see them really hit it between 30 and 34 before it starts to go downhill. So I think he's going to be in tip-top shape. This is his opportunity. If he does perform at an extremely high level, you might not even make the argument that he needs another fight before he gets the next opportunity or gets the next shot at the belt. So yeah, I think the cardio and the 5-round, that's I'm not worried about that at all, especially with an opponent like Usman. I think he'll be ready for that. And I think we'll see both guys, pretty fresh in those later rounds for sure.
Yeah, one more thing. Sorry, Zach. One more thing to touch on here is I know I touched on Usman's lack of activity. He hasn't fought in a year and a half. Well, I don't think ring rust will play a factor. I do think it'll take a round, at least maybe half a round to a round, that first round, for Usman, to find his groove again, just a little bit. So I think the first round is going to be a little bit on the slower side, which definitely helps Buckley, in my opinion, for cardio. He's going to, be able to coast a little bit in round 1, see while Usman warms up, and he's just getting back into that octagon after around 18 months.
Yeah, and I guess I never actually gave my prediction here. I was just thinking about that. But I'm also going to be on the side of Joaquin Buckley because, again, like you guys touched on, it's just trajectories. You have the guy scorching hot coming up versus the guy who was already at the top, knows what it was like to be at the top, and is now 38 years old without the belt. But I did want to say, because I know you guys were talking about what they'll need to do after in order to get the belt, or get a shot at the belt, I should say. I think if Kamaru Usman beats Joaquin Buckley, I think he's about guaranteed a title shot almost. as much as like you'd probably be like, what are you talking about? He's 38 and this is his last hurrah. And I think the UFC, I mean, maybe Islam moving up it might hurt Usman's shot just because of how stacked that division is, but I still think they'd give it to him. And Buckley might be in the same realm, or he might have like an Ian Gary fight potentially after. But the other thing I wanted to ask you guys, because I mean, we're on the side of Joaquin Buckley over Kamaru Usman here, which just sounds crazy to say out loud, just given how we all kind of grew up during the UFC era of Kamaru Usman when he was just so damn dominant. So my question is, Ryan, I'll let you start this one off. Like, when was the point in time where Joaquin Buckley surpassed Kamaru Usman on his way up, with Usman going down in your mind?
It's probably after that Colby Covington fight. I mean, Usman and Covington both fought wars, and now like that, the fact that they're on the back end of their career, I see not a doctor stoppage, because obviously Colby was never measured up to Usman in that regard. You know, he lost the belt off him twice, but I mean, it's hard to say if he surpassed him yet. We have to see. I mean, like Usman, you talk about Usman, the guy, you know, you might be on a 3-fight skid, but he fought Leon Edwards twice and then fought Khamzat Chimaev on 10 days notice up a weight class. So the leaning trajectory towards careers and, you know, him being older, it favors an advantage as like an advantage for Buckley, but at the same time, we haven't seen Usman fight. I lean towards Buckley based off of activity and that 6-fight win streak, and he's on the come up. You know, he's hungry. You know, he wants it. He wants it. But we won't know until we see Usman in the octagon. You know, it's some of those things you really can't predict. I mean, if Usman was out here losing to contenders, you know, like say he lost to a Sean Brady or, you know, an Ian Gary or a Carlos Prates or something like that, I guess that's when you'd flip and say, yeah, Buckley has surpassed him. But with the lack of activity out of Usman and him not being in the octagon for 18 months, you really can't say if Buckley has surpassed him or not yet at this point. At least that's my opinion.
Well, yeah, that's what Saturday night's for.
Yeah, right.
But go on, Luke.
Yeah, no, I agree with both. I think it hasn't really happened yet in terms of like the passing of the baton. I think that's what happens on Saturdays. Like I'm assuming that's what you were about to get into. I want to preface this, like, if we, you know, I don't know if we're going to recap this or not, but come Sunday morning, if Usman has a path to victory and we see an Usman of old, or even kind of the Usman that came out against Khamzat and, you know, had a great fight in that loss, I don't think I would be surprised. Like, this is still a champion. We've seen him fight at, you know, 36, 35 years old and still look good. Like, this isn't like a super one-sided matchup. I think if Buckley is able to get his hand raised on Saturday, that's when I could honestly be like, okay, like this is the passing of the baton. Usman's no longer in that category of like, oh, guys, we could even discuss in the belt conversation. But yeah, I don't think that has happened yet. I think Kobe is still a well below fighter compared to Usman now. I think if they were fighting on Saturday, I would have way more in favor of Usman versus Kobe than Buckley against Usman here. So I think the passing baton still has to happen, and potentially will happen on Saturday. But we got to give our flowers to Kamaru Usman, man. He's a former champ, one of the best ever. And those guys, you know, you see with Volk, like sometimes even when they're old, they still have it to beat the prospects that are up and coming and have won a lot of fights in a row.
And I will say, like, I know all three of us picked Joaquin Buckley in our prediction, but Kamaru Usman by the public in general is being extremely disrespected. I don't think I've seen one person online say they think Kamaru Usman's going to win this fight. And the whole narrative is, oh, your knees are shot. Oh, your hips, whatever it is. But it's like, guys, the knees have been like this for how long? And now he has the recovery time. He says he's feeling good. Yeah. Granted, every single fighter says that before they fight. I understand that. And I don't need any feedback based off that. But I don't know, man. It's still Kamaru Usman, and just seeing the level of disrespect, especially by like a lot of newer MMA fans, is really bothering me, because it's like you didn't see him in his prime. Like, you don't know what he's capable of. You started watching the UFC when he got head kicked by Leon Edwards, and that's just kind of your opinion on him, and you don't understand how great of a fighter this guy truly is. And that still is there. It's just whether or not it can come out at this age, I guess. But with that being said, I guess, Luke, I actually had one more question, and I'll target it your way. Do you think Leon's downfall with like the loss to Bilal Muhammad and then just getting absolutely dominated by Sean Brady, and then on top of that, Bilal then and going and losing the belt to JDM, do you think that's hurt the outlook on Usman at all and what the public is and what the public perception is?
No, I think that's a hard argument to make because the UFC is all about matchups. I mean, I think yeah, the Sean Brady I was a little bit surprised with. I definitely had Leon Edwards going into that fight, and I thought stylistically the way Leon Edwards was able to defend the takedowns in the Usman fight would have, that would have played a factor. But Sean Brady's another one of those guys like up and coming. He's right in the conversation for the belt too. And Bilal, obviously, I still think Bilal, other than JDM, and I thought we could all agree, Bilal fought a great fight against JDM. He just didn't fight as good as JDM did. I don't think it hurts him, man. Like, in all honesty, that if Usman lasts one more minute in that first fight, Leon never gets the rematch. And Leon Edwards is still like he won 12 straight fights in the UFC, something crazy like that. Like he's still one of the best guys in this division, even though he's on a little bit of a skid, but he's on a skid against the competitors for the belt. We've seen Usman do it against everyone. I don't think it hurts his resume, and I think the Khamzat loss doesn't hurt his resume. I think it shows how game he is, and sometimes matchups just don't play out your way, man. I think Leon Edwards is just a really hard matchup for Kamaru Usman.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at like a lot of champions in the UFC, this tends to happen. And it's like you have Anderson Silva, who's about the Chris Weidman, then Chris Weidman goes on a skid, and doesn't have the most favorable outcome in his career, through the latter half. I'm blanking on names here. I mean, even you could argue Demetrius Johnson, lose the belt to Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo now on a 3-fight loss streak, coming back into the UFC even after being double champ. I really don't think it's a stain on your resume to lose to any of these guys, especially when you fight someone in their prime at 31, 32, 33 that is able to take the belt off you and defend it maybe one or two times, and then loses to, like, to your point, to the up-and-comers. I mean, when you look at Sean Brady, he's a killer. We could even have this conversation, once about Islam. JDM beats Islam, or Islam beats JDM, and then JDM loses 3 fights in a row, against Ian Gary, Sean Brady, like these guys that are on a tear. It's hard to say. This is like a career trajectory, and on paper it might look bad, but it happens to pretty much every champion in the UFC, unless you're a Khabib or a John Jones, it seems like.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said there, and I definitely don't think that it like puts a stain on Usman's resume at all. I just think that it could kind of leave a sour taste in some fans' mouth, or some just MMA fans' mouths, kind of, where they're like, oh man, if this just happened to Leon after he beat Kamaru, what's going to happen when he goes and fights whoever, where I think it might kind of put Kamaru in a worse light than if Leon obviously were to have not gone on that skid. But yeah, I definitely agree with your guys' take on that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the fighter and how long they choose to stay in the game. So, it's like Father Time catches up to you all. Obviously if Usman goes out and does like the Anderson Silva trajectory where he fights 5 or 6 more times and loses all 6, then yeah. And then in terms of like a Tony Ferguson who just stayed in the UFC, and just hung on way longer than he should have and goes on like that. Obviously, I don't think there will be a Tony Ferguson in the UFC again. They gave that man so much rope when they shouldn't have. But, it's the same thing. It's just, you go on those 6, 7, 8 fight loss streaks. I see Usman, if he loses to Joaquin Buckley, maybe fighting one more time and announcing his retirement. I mean, he's 38, but he's a smart guy, and I think, with the time off that he's taken now, he's kind of taken a backseat to the end of his career. Maybe if he beats Joaquin Buckley Saturday night, I'm sure he'll be just calling for that title shot, and it'll probably be title or bust for him. But other than that, he might fight one more contender, or maybe run a trilogy match with Colby Covington. But I think Usman's smart enough to know when to hang up the gloves, and to put him down. So I don't see this being, too big of a stain on the guy's legacy here, even if he loses.
Yeah, agreed. And if no one has anything else, that is all that I have. Well, besides the fact that San said Joaquin Buckley buy whatever he wants. Sorry, San, I forgot to mention that earlier, but that is it for the night. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's always a pleasure.
I got one more thing. One more thing before we log off here. I know this is MMA, especially UFC podcast, but if you guys saw, Terrence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez is signed up. I forget when the date is. It's later this year on Netflix. That is a fight. I know boxing kind of has taken the back, especially in America, to the UFC and to MMA. But that is a fight that everyone that, if you're a sports fan, you got to tune into that fight. That's the clash of two of the greatest of all time. I'm super looking forward to that fight. That's going to be great. So I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know if you guys saw that or have any thoughts on that fight, but I'm super excited.
No, I kind of disagree with you, Luke. I think boxing's still killing it. They just put on a crazy event in the middle of Times Square. I wish the UFC would do something like that. You know what I mean? Like boxing's still trying to evolve and still capture that American audience, and I appreciate it to an extent. And one other thing to note here at that fight in September is it's right now reportedly the reason why there is no pay-per-view in September for the UFC, even though they have a fight night in Paris. Cyril Gane's open the fight in Tom Aspinall. Make that a pay-per-view, strip John Jones of the belt, and just have them fight for the vacant belt. That would be sick. If you need if you need a pay-per-view event in September, which you're struggling to find right now, strip John Jones, book Aspinall versus Gane. Aspinall wipe the floor with him, become the undisputed champ, and maybe John will come out of the woodwork and finally fight Tom. Amen.
I will say this will be the last thing I have. Agreed there, Ryan. I've had too much of this whole John Jones saga. But if we do not have a UFC pay-per-view for a month because Dana White is promoting this Canelo fight, I am just not going to be a happy UFC fan. Like, I get it. I know it's all under the TKO umbrella, but come on, Dana. Come on. But with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Ryan, Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure, fellas, and we'll be back next week.